After drafting concise and effective digital work instructions, the next step is to organize processes into sub-assemblies and configure our product workflow. Today, we'll be exploring some best practices for managing our work instructions and supporting content, and how to use our workflow tools to make this task even easier and faster. I have all these sub-assemblies on the table sitting here in front of me. We have a bunch of content and work instructions for each one, ranging from print head components for our DLP printer, electrical assemblies, structural components for the frame, but how can really anyone manage these? All of these are built on their own at individual workbenches, but we need to put a structure to this flow to make sure that this content is digestible by the engineers, and so the operators can pick what they're building. So I'll be walking through our product workflow tool to see how we can manage some of that chaos into something with a little bit more content and structure. The way that essentially works is we have a workflow tool here, which each of our processes organized by these squares. Each one has as low as 1 to 2, with maybe 3 steps, all the way up to a dozen, maybe 20 or more for the more complicated processes. To manage this, we have the ability to drag and drop these tiles around into a structure benefiting our factory production flow. So when we have this frame assembly here, for example, if I want to move this ahead of all the other processes, I simply just need to drag it out to the front, and then this is done in sequence before all these other sub-assemblies. If I want to move one of these other pieces of content out to the side as kicked off with my production order at the beginning of my process, I can certainly do that as well and fully change the flow of my structure here. All of this is revision controlled and has change control organized on the shop floor, so we can see every single iteration of this and manage it and tie it to work orders, job numbers, and bill of materials. Now that we have this structure, we can see truly the organized nature of this flow. We want to make sure that instead of having some implicit or assumption that we have this flow that makes sense in your head, now it's tracked in sequence with the structure, and we can see this flow both from a manufacturing, engineering, design perspective and for our operators when they're figuring out what to build. It's important to remember that I'm only building one of these here. As we're setting up our structure for the first time, this might make sense from a first run, second run production flow, but we want to have this structure locked down so as you go to that serialized production flow, you have all this content locked down and organized, and you can make adjustments on the fly. That way, when we have our first builds here within the first production run, we can always make iterations, manage our product families. As you grow more and more versions of this content, we have the ability to manage this across different product families, different variations of the same structure, but it's important to start from a good foundation and a good structure at the beginning. Organizing workflows is essential from scaling from prototype to production. Now that we have this framework in place, we're ready to start thinking about the tools that we need to not only build our 3D printer, but manage some of those common pain points as we go through the assembly process. Tune into our next episode as we go through a few examples that might help mitigate some of those scrap, rework, or engineering design issues.